I volunteered after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and there was something there that still scares me to this day. I have a medical background and a certification I rarely use, though I keep going back and paying to renew it. I volunteered almost immediately, thinking I would help those and have lived through Katrina. That was not the case. There were a few of us who were assigned once the water started to recede to find houses that had dead bodies in them. If you've ever had to do a body recovery when it has been lying around in the heat and the water for days, sometimes weeks at a time, you know how it smells. It does sort of smell like any other dead carcass, but worse. I can't explain it, but somehow sweeter smelling. Anyway, the key to not vomiting when you smell them is Vicks in, under, and around the bottom of your nose. It doesn't keep all the smell out, but enough until you can at least tolerate the smell without vomiting. We had to go to each house and go inside in wading boots and look for bodies. Many of them washed out to sea, but some were still in the house they had lived in prior to the hurricane. If we found a body, we spray painted a big X on the outside of the house. This other guy and I had been doing it for a while, and we got assigned to each other almost every day. We got along okay, and he didn't vomit at the bodies that we found. We came up to this one old shack. I say shack because it was pretty run down and in what had been a very bad neighborhood. Right away, I got chills down my spine. I knew there was something really wrong. Not like finding a body kind of wrong, but chilling kind of wrong. New Orleans has certain areas that just give off these vibes, and my understanding is there is a lot of voodoo practice in certain areas. Anyway, against everything my body was screaming at me, we went into the house. The first thing I could smell was a body. The second was something almost earthy and mold. I looked at my partner. I will call him Jay. He was white as a sheet. I could tell he was getting that same feeling I had been getting. It was obvious from the weird bones hanging from the ceiling. I would bet money they were cats. Something odd had been going down in the house, as well as strange beads and carvings in the bare woods in the walls. We went into what was the kitchen, and there, chained to a beam, was an old lady, or what was left of her. She had chained herself by her wrist to the beam. Her guts were falling out on the floor. The creepiest thing though was her face still looked as though she were alive and staring at us with a wicked smile showing only partial teeth. They were nubs. My skin started crawling as the goosebumps spread over my body and my neck hair stood up. Suddenly, I heard the most unearthly cackling noise I have ever heard in my life, and my flight or fight kicked in. Jay and I noped out of there. We quickly painted the X and literally ran to the next house. Now, I don't know if that old lady had practiced voodoo or whatever, but that scared the ever-living crap out of me. It still gives me nightmares. The people I feel sorry for are the ones who had to take that crazy lady out of there. Jay and I discussed it that night after we went back to the hotels north of there. He had heard the cackling too, but we both said it had to be the wind or something. I saw something on the way home from work that scared me half to death. This happened about 10 minutes after I left the work today, 4th of July 2020. I live in Northeast Ohio, and I got a job about 2 months ago as a process technician at a dairy plant. It pays very good money considering it's a 35-mile drive one way. After about 20 or 25 miles, I drive through a wooded area. Nothing uncommon for me, as where I live, forests are common, and I pretty much lived in one behind grandma's house growing up. I work 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. and the drive home sucks, whether it's being tired, hungry, or the fog almost every night. I go the same way every day and night. I was driving my way home. I just left the residential area of my workplace and I was going through the forested area. As I said, there's almost fog every night, so I'm on high alert for deer, raccoons, and such critters. It's just like every other drive home so far. I have a podcast on, focusing on the road, thinking of getting either a sausage McMuffin or a McGriddle from McDonald's, and sometimes looking off to the side of the road for any eyes reflecting off my headlights. All of a sudden, I see some reflecting eyes. Out of the woods comes a coyote. In my hometown, coyotes aren't too rare. I've seen them by my high school, but I've never seen one outside of my hometown, so it surprised me. I started slowing down as it crossed the road, until it turned to my car and sits in the road. It sat about 10 feet from my car. There had been no cars I had seen since leaving the residential area, so I was about to go around it, but I thought this was too odd of a thing to happen to just drive away from it. I expected it to just get up and walk away any given second. This is where I began to get very scared. I honked my horn, and after about 2 or 3 seconds, it smiles at me. I have my brights on, so I could see it perfectly. This coyote had human-shaped teeth. My heart dropped and every hair on my body raised. I sat there in fear for about 5 seconds before shoving my foot on the pedal and driving at getaway speed. I didn't stop to get food because I didn't have an appetite anymore. I thought about what I saw the rest of the ride home. Once doubting I saw it, but like I said, with my brights on and as close to my car as it was, I saw it as clear as day. This coyote had human teeth, and there was no doubt about it. I'm very into paranormal, and that includes cryptids. Is it normal if I ran into a skinwalker or some genetically mutated coyote? I am Native American if that counts for anything. It's so weird typing this out, but I'd like someone who knows more about these things to help out if they can. I know one thing though, that I'm finding a new way to work. Truly the most terrifying experience I've ever had. So one night, my wife, son, and I went to stay over at my wife's parents' house. It had gotten dark and my son, about 2 at the time, got sleepy, so I decided to put him in bed. Let me try to explain the room to you. The door opens on the right side of the room. Immediately to your left is the light switch and the queen-size bed is just besides that. It's a small room, just big enough for the bed and enough room to walk around the bed. The wall in front of the bed has a window. To the left of the bed is a closet with those weird accordion doors. I'm laying in bed with the lights out with my son, who is laying his head on my arm. He finally falls asleep and I just lie there for a few minutes to make sure he's completely out. Then, out of nowhere, I get this horrible feeling. Goosebumps. Hair standing up on my neck and arms. It was such an evil feeling. Have you ever got goosebumps up your scalp where it feels like your scalp is shrinking? I did that night. So bad, in fact, it literally felt like someone had a hand on my head squeezing it. I was genuinely scared. Not so much for me, but for my son. Somehow I knew deep down if I turn away from my son, something bad will happen to him. I thought if I turned on the light, I could grab my son and leave the room. So there I was on a bed. I could barely touch the plastic bezel thing on the light switch. I was afraid to move because I knew if I did, whatever this thing is, it would get my son. His head was on my arm this whole time. So I finally chanced upon it. I jerked my arm around my son and turned on the light. It honestly took a split second. When I turned back to grab him, he was at the bottom of the mattress. Like someone had pulled him from the top to the bottom in a split second. And I know he didn't crawl down there because he was still fast asleep. So I grabbed him up and we left the room and slept in a front room that night. Something evil wanted my child. That is truly terrifying.